Hello, welcome to Saturday evening here at Relove Guitars, and this evening we've got a load of people parked up in here and over across the other side of the road in a kind of campsite. I think there's a bunch of people on their way down to Cornwall camping over tonight, so there's a bit of a party atmosphere going on there, lots of kids yelling and shouting, but it sounds like good fun. Anyway, we have number 4 of Jonathan's 5 guitars, and this is the Vintage Icon Series V6, and it's a relic style Strat guitar. Now I'll say something straight away, as we discovered the other day, the relic on vintage guitars is not massively convincing, right? So that's okay, it's a sort of stylish thing, and this actually, I have to say, I don't even know how this is done, whether this is actually, it can't be a photo thing, but it almost looks like a photo finish of some kind. I genuinely can't see how they could have done that, but it looks like a photo finish, but it's really odd. But anyway, it doesn't look like it's worn away with time. It's been scraped away or designed on a computer or something. It's really odd. Anyway, so we have some hardware that's a bit grungy. We have some edges scraped off kind of on purpose. We have a slightly darkened, scuffed up neck. We have some aged looking bits and bobs. So, you know, they've had a go at making it look old, and to be fair, compared to the V120s, this one's a bit better looking. It doesn't hurt the eye so much, but as somebody described the V120s the other day as looking like it looked like a scratch card that had been scraped. I thought that was a pretty extremely good description. Anyway, so here we have the V6. Now, that's not a very warm welcome, but I like these V6s, and there's something about them. I think over time, I think I got to like the vintage neck generally. Vintage and John Hornby Skew's brand guitars, including Encores, which are all from the same family, I find they're dependable necks and they will play really well. Again, it's a taste preference thing. You know, what I like, loads of people won't, but I do like them. I don't like guitars that lay on the saffron colour, you know, the yellow stain, very, you know, it's just bright yellow really. And this one has patches where you can see it's sort of gone thin and it hasn't taken underneath the decals and whatever. But, you know, it's better than sort of neutral, anonymous maple colour. And then we've got the Wilkinson bridge down here with some rust built up on it, and yeah, you know, an oldish looking tremolo arm. Although I don't know if this is actually the right one, because this feels, unless I'm gone mad, is this a left-handed arm? Looking the way it's sticking out, I can't remember. I always thought the arm would have gone inwards, but I could be very wrong, I could be right. Anyway, whatever it is, this is the arm that came with it. So we've got a Wilkinson humbucker and Wilkinson single coils with staggered poles, and a bit of iron filings caught on those as well. You can get those off with a bit of sticky tape. Anyway, so this is in for a setup, and you know, I just had a little go on it. And there's a couple of things that strike me straight away. One is that it's got a new bone nut in it, which isn't bad at all. The first fret action is also not bad. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. We've got a bridge that sounds like it's working, but it's sort of floating, but doesn't quite have the backward range, so it might as well not be floating. So I don't quite know what it's doing. I've not brought my notes with me, so now as I start this, I can't remember whether Jonathan wants this one flat on the deck or fully floating. So I'm going to set it fully floating, because I can always put it back. Well, I could do it the other way around. I could set it, I could leave it, and then I'll check my notes at home and we'll set it fully floating at home if necessary. It's easy enough to do. I've got a tuner and I've got some post-it notes, which is the method I use. Okay, so I'm just going to, I'll sort of ignore the tremolo for this part of things, but what I will do is I'll start by setting it down flat. The reason I like the Wilkinson tremolo, by the way, as you probably know, is that it has a full weight block normally. I mean, there's two types now. There's a sort of genuine inverted commas, Wilkinson one, and then there's an M series, slightly cheaper Wilkinson one, and I prefer the genuine Wilkinson one, which is now a bit more expensive than the M series, but I think this is the decent version. And I only draw a distinction between them because on one, possibly two of the M series ones that I've got, oh jeez, I've done it again, sorry, switch the sound over, hold on, I'm going to stop. I can't believe it. Right, back again. This time I've done it, you can see that I've not been using this head mounted mic for a while, so I forgot to connect it, fire it up, so you didn't get any of the head mounted mic on the first bit. So that's interesting. Okay, so we've got, look at that, brand clean spanking new bridge in there. Kind of belies the whole relic looking thing, but there's your basic bridge. Yeah, the two types there are, there's an M series bridge, and it looks identical to the Wilkinson standard bridge, but the M series I think is a little bit more inexpensively manufactured, and I don't quite like the feel of it as much, and the thing that's really let it down for me on one that I've had is the little screw in the back of there's a little grub screw in the back of the block, which is there so that once your arm is in, you can tighten it up and get a certain amount of stiffness in the arm so it doesn't rattle or slap about, and that really makes these tremolo arms great. The Wilkinson tremolo arm, the no screw, just push in tremolo arm is brilliant. But like I said, the M series ones, I'm not confident about the grub screw. One I had stripped the thread straight away, and then as a result it was completely useless. Now the other thing I'm going to just check on here, might look like a small detail, but I think it's quite an important one, is when you have a tremolo system, whether you're using it or not, what you don't want is the screws, the trem screws, to be down on the deck. Now some of these are already kind of squashed down on the deck, so I'm just going to lift them away, keep them. I know it's not great for the strings, but these are going to be chucked away. So I'm just backing them off the surface of the thing, because what you don't want at all in any point in the game is for these screws to be pressing down on the front edge of this plate. They want to be just slightly above it. Their only job is to provide a surface for the holes, or for this plate to rock against the tops of these screws. If you screw it down, you will force the tremolo to go like this, because there's a chamfer on the front edge of it, and that will prevent it from working smoothly. So I've already, having just taken the pressure off that, I'm going to find this actually moves more freely than it did before, and that looks about right, and maybe a little bit more off here. So I don't want that in play right now, but it's there if I want it. And we'll consult my notes, and I'll add the float to the tremolo later on once we've done everything else. So there's another thing about this guitar that I need to point out. I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see the alignment of the strings is not good, right? So the neck isn't properly aligned. So that's quite common on Strat type guitars, and in a way the good thing about Strat type guitars is that you can fix that, because it's all to do with the where you can move the neck. In fact, I've just moved it manually there without even undoing any screws, so that's actually where it should be. Let's see what kind of tightness is happening on these screws right now, because really, yeah, they're not actually that tightly done up. So that one's quite loose. So having tightened those up a bit, I think we've just rearranged that straight away. Well, that's pretty good. The idea is normally you can't move it when the screws are done up. In this case it was a little bit loose, so it moved straight away, which is probably why it's moved out of position. Now for me personally, when I make guitars, I much prefer the feeling that once I put the neck in, it's tightly fixed in place, and I don't really want it. I don't want it to move, or I don't want to be able to undo the screws, move it to one side and screw it back down. I want I want everything to work just by putting the neck into this very snug thing. That's kind of easier for me because I make the pocket myself to fit the neck, the precise same neck. Whereas with this, it's a standard thing, and they have to have, obviously they have a little bit of room for tolerance to accommodate fractional changes, you know, out of a different production line or a different batch of necks. You still want them to fit. You don't want to be caught with them and filing, you know, sanding down things to get it to fit. So they build in a little bit of slack, and consequently that means that if the bolts aren't done up tightly, or if you push it, or if you undo the screws and wiggle it around, you can put the neck back pretty well out of alignment if you wish. But of course the corollary is true, and that means you can obviously push it back into the right alignment and then screw it down as I did. But like I say, I much prefer knowing that once you put the neck in, it's there in place. And of course you don't have that issue with set neck guitars. Alright, so that's done. A couple of other things about this guitar. There is a bit of what I call, you can hear it, fret slap. So although the action on this isn't that bad at the moment, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to lower the action a bit more. I'm going to put a tiny bit of relief in the neck, because currently there is no relief at all in the neck. It is flat as anything, which is not going to help playability really. These guitars are not built to be, that's the wrong one, they're not really happy to play on a completely flat neck. So if it's too flat, I'm going to try, if I can get a hex key in there, I'm going to just slack off the thing a bit. Now here's an interesting thing, I can actually see a fret that's sticking up here. Where is it gone? Damn. It's sometimes quite a good idea to just have a look down the row of frets and see what you see. Okay, that one there. So fret number 5 is actually sticking up a bit at the edge, and I wouldn't be surprised if it makes 4 a little bit noisier. No, not so bad, but it is sitting up. But that's just checking it with the eyes. Okay, so I've done a bit of changed the truss rod setting, and we've got a little bit of relief now. It's only a tiny bit, and that's as much as I want. But I want it slightly relieved, i.e., not dead flat. That's the idea. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use little hex keys to wind down and adjust the grub screws on the bridge. Now I'm setting this action right now with the bridge flat, so things will change a little bit when if I come to set some float in it, but we'll reconsider the action later. What I'm going to do now is treat it as a hardtail. So right now it's playing at just over 2.5 millimeters and about 1.75. No, actually, no, it's more than that. Hold on a minute. 1.6. 1.6. So it's a little bit high all round. So I'm going to take down the treble side of things a little bit, and I'm going to try and get 1.2 and about the same there. That's good. Tiny bit off here. What am I looking at? Where am I going? I was thinking about them in pairs. Silly me. Right. I was thinking there were 2 strings on a single block, which is nuts. So that's about 1.5. That's about 1.3. That's about 1.5. Take it down a tiny fraction, and we've got 1.6 there, that's about right, and we've got, actually no, what are we saying, that's about 1.5 we want. Now this one's quite a lot too high, so what we're going to find, I think, is as we bring the A down to just about the 1.5 and then we bring the E down, we're going to get a lot more of that fret slap kicking off, I'm afraid, and we might get some choke outs on the bends as well. So what we really want is something like this, and we're looking at still around about 2 there, so still a little bit too much. Okay, and I usually like to kind of eyeball it too, because you can sort of see where things are way out of line with each other. Get a sort of dependable, smooth line, you can see it. So I would say we're about 1 point, actually we're still high, a little over 1.5 there. This is going to be noisy, I think. Now I think this one, I can't remember whether this was a 7.2. No, I looked at this one. It said it was a 7.5 radius, but we'll double check. Okay, that's a bit all right. So we're about out of tune, of course. So let's get it back up to approximately in tune and see how it plays. So you can hear, first of all, what you can hear is what I call fret slap. And fret slap is that buzz that seems to follow loads of notes one after another. And that sort of tells you, that's still very flat, that tells you, well, let's put it this way, my way of describing these two types of buzz, there's fret buzz, which we might call that a little bit of fret buzz, where it's on one fret more than another. Fret slap is what I would call this. And my experience is that fret buzz is caused by recognisably uneven single frets, that would be it high or low. But fret slap is a term I use to remind me that what I'm hearing is not enough room for the string to swing around and do its thing. Now, what I'm going to aim to do with this is to level the frets a little bit. Now, I played all those notes going up and most of them were pretty good. There's very little fret buzz in the old-fashioned style, so that's a good sign for this guitar, a good mark. We've got a little bit of height there, so it's not like it's totally flat causing this. But I think we need to try and cure the fret slap. And what I found over the years of doing this is you can fix the fret slap by dialing the correct curve or matching the curve of the neck, however slight, with your banana truss rod device, as I'm going to do, and then you allow what I call the perfect, in inverted commas, the ideal curve of the rod to gently level into the less than ideal curve. of the neck itself. So what I'm doing is, when I put these 3 points in place like this, I'm marking effectively 3 sample points to map this curve. Now it's very imprecise, 3 sample points to represent an entire curve. Right? You're not silly, you know for common sense that if I say to you, here's a continuous curve, right? And you go, look, that's a curve, right? And if I say to you, well, I haven't got a line, or I might say to you, here's a load of dots, and see how they sort of kind of represent the curve, just those little dots all together, yeah? If what have I said to you, well, I've got that one there, and that one there, and you know that's a curve, or it's describing, or it's yeah, it's kind of representing a curve, but you can see that in our minds we're filling in the gaps here, but they're much closer together. In our minds here we could go like that, right? That's filling in the curve. But actually what's interesting is that when we place we have our neck, and we place the points down like this, and they basically roughly go like that, we know that while in fact the underlying fretboard is in truth a bit like this, I'm exaggerating, right? But that still has all those sitting on the curve in the right place. But what's interesting is that our truss rod, if I can get these bloody pens out, the truss rod can't do that. The truss rod is nice and metallic, and what it does is when we bend it, it's very exaggerated, right? It does that. It bends as smoothly as it can between those 3 points. And then when you sort of take these away, look at what you're looking at there, right? You're looking at what I call the ideal curve. It's badly drawn, right? It's not pointed. It's meant to be just a curve. But it's a smooth curve between those 3 points. And then what happens is when we lower it down onto the imperfect curve represented by the organic wood that bumps up and down and has various different sort of peaks and troughs, what happens strangely is that as we bring them together, the perfect curve just evens out or irons out some of the worst bits microscopically of the high spots there, and kind of gives us a bit more of a real curve, or a more of a perfect curve. And my experience has shown that that action is enough to mostly clear up the what I call fret slap, that sound you heard there. All right. Now it doesn't always do it completely, but it certainly, sometimes it does do it completely, but it certainly helps to eliminate it. So the only way I've worked it out is that it does it by exactly as described. It maps the more ideal curve, or the more perfect curve of the rod, the sanding beam that we've calibrated to those 3 sample points of the curve. It maps that more ideal curve onto the slightly bumpy organic curve of the neck itself. And you might sort of wonder why a guitar neck will have that imperfect curve. Well, first of all, it's wood, and wood on its own won't kind of sit perfectly flat. So even when you dial any curvature out of this neck, even with the strings off, and you look down this neck, there are always some very slight imperfections. You can sometimes see little dinks and dimples and ups and downs. But even more so when you put the neck under load, the loading makes it behave slightly differently because it compresses it longitudinally, and that seems to introduce even more ups and downs into the neck itself. So so the idea of this is to level, when I'm leveling the frets using the adjustable beam, and the beam is set to that, an analog, if you like, of the imperfect curve, or a more perfect version of the real curve of the neck, or the bumps of the neck. It's going to, we're putting it under load of the strings. That's introducing as much of bumpiness as the neck organically is going to allow, and then we put our smooth, perfect curve in inverted commas onto it, and hopefully we clear the tops of those clear the tops of those peaks away. Now the thing is, I've always said that the playability of your neck is dictated more by the low frets than the high ones. And in truth, that's the way it is. Particularly, so if it's an individual fret that's high, then you can use the beam to just snip off that high bit and bring it down in line with everything else. But you find more often than not, it's the low frets that impose or dictate what you can do, because when you have a low fret, it drops into a little hole between, so like down here, if there's a low fret, what you find is the low fret makes the next fret relatively high. So you might as well, as far as the playability is concerned, the same effects come into play when you've got a low fret. It makes the next one, so if this one was low, then this one would appear to be high relative to that one. And this one, when you fret down in here, you're fretting in a ditch, and this one will choke off. So to counteract the lowness of that one, you have to actually gently bottom out the whole of the fretboard around the low fret. So you can see that a low fret is actually more of a problem on a guitar neck than a high fret is. But I've calibrated the beam now to this neck, and what I'm going to do is just very gently, I've got some new paper on there too, so it's brand fresh 400 grit. So I'm just going to go up and down lightly without really pushing at all, just mainly using gravity, and I'm just letting the beam kind of work on the frets and cut them a little bit, and in doing so it's going to fairly quickly tell me what's going on, i.e. by looking at it. I don't know how well you can see that, but if you look down and see the sort of the dust patches, and we're a bit of a long way out, but maybe you can't see so well. Let's come around and have a look. So dust kicking up there, so that's high compared to that one, which is lower. That one's even lower, so we've got a little low spot here. Then we've got a high one here, because you can see it's been cut. That one's cut, then there's a low one, then there's a high one, then there's two low ones. So look at the ups and downs we've got already. Then we've got 3, 4 high ones, a low one, high, high, well, high, medium, medium, high-ish, okay, medium. So what we've definitely got is a low spot. Now we're only talking about this edge first, because it could change by the time we get to this edge. So we've got low spot here, a low spot there, but it's 2 frets wide each time, a low spot there, and a single low spot there. Now that basically is that, as drawn there. So you heard before we started leveling, you heard that it seemed to play all right, and it did at the height that we've got the action, which is reasonably low but not stupid low. You could hear that even without leveling, each of the individual frets were going to play okay. But we've just revealed, with a very minor or minimal bit of leveling, we've now identified where the low spots are. There. But even though that's the case, they're playing individually okay. So we're just going to carry on across to the next track. And what the challenge is going to be, because we noticed that there were no frets that were so uneven that it was choking out strings on the bends. So this is a pretty good fret set, but what I'm expecting to do is to encounter some problems as we go across here. So the first little bit of leveling, you might argue that it might, why did I do it if the notes were playing? Well, I did it because I want to treat the whole of the fingerboard together. I don't want to just tackle this edge here and leave that edge out, because then we'll end up with higher frets there on the treble side than on the bass side. But I want to go across, and I want to, basically I'm doing a very, that was hardly any material coming off. It looks like a little bit of dust, but it's very, very minimal. But it gives me a very clear look at the condition of the neck. So I now know that there are these 3 low spots, and they're not in any one place. Right now they're sited in 2, sorry, they're not all over, they're sited in 2 spots. So as I go across into the B track, I'm going to use the same calibration to gently run the beam up and down again. And what you may find as you move across into the B track is you may actually find that the bit that the high spots that you saw in the E track may suddenly start to disappear, and they may even change over so that the high spots go away and they become low spots as you come this way, and another fret that was low suddenly seems high. Now this seems better. We've now got I can see now almost all of the frets are getting cut. There's a low spot here still, which was low already there, but it's just been cut, but it's the lowest fret in the line, and a slightly low bit there, but otherwise that's all good. So that then tells me we had some frets that are high at the edge and some low at the edge, which is actually quite common, because right at the edge is where your frets are going to stick up, or sometimes they may be pressed down too far. Also, the edges can often be uneven where they're rolled off. So people sometimes talk about rolling off the edges of fretboards, and sometimes people do it, manufacturers sometimes do it, and it can be a little bit uneven. So I'm just looking to recalibrate now as I'm just north, I call it, north of the G track, and now the neck relief is flattening out a tiny bit there. So I'm just going to slack off the adjustment here, and I think that's better. Now that's mapping it better. Now again, I didn't pick up anything particularly bad in the G track, but I'm going to just do the same pass over it like last time, just to track the change in evenness, make sure that we know what the trend is across the radius. That still looks all good. We're touching just about everything, so I'm happy with that. By the time you get to the end, you can usually see the little puffs where you've had the issues. A bit of an issue there on the edge, there on the edge, a little cluster here, and it builds up like a little dusty map. So sometimes I clean off the dust in between levels. Sometimes I leave it on and sort of look at it as a whole thing at the end. So now I'm calibrating for the D track, and that's about right too. This neck is currently now, as we know, it had very little relief, so it's currently very, very slightly curved, and it's about as flat as this thing will go, which is just fine. If we wanted the neck dead flat, this tool wouldn't be the best for it, because it has, at its limit, it has a little bit of curvature in it. It's just the way they made it. I could probably, machine it flat on a sanding block or something, but since I almost never go to level a neck completely flat, I always put a little bit of relief in there, so I don't ever need that beam to be completely flat. Now at this point, as I'm going into the wound strings, this is where you get the fret slap becoming a problem. That's not bad. Now listen to the A. Not a ton, but not as much as the E, but it's starting to build up the slap down here in the first half. So this is going to be the challenge, the A and the E. And the reason it's a challenge is because the thick strings, thicker wound strings are, they move more. They're slacker, relatively speaking, and they move more and they need more room. So what I've found over the years of doing this is that because the treble strings, thinner strings, don't move so much, they can tolerate, in inverted commas, a bit more of a bumpy neck profile with little peaks sticking up in their way. But because the lower strings move more, they are less tolerant of that bumpiness. So what I'm now looking to do with the A is, I know there aren't any single high frets that are causing a choking problem. So now I'm thinking about leveling from the point of view of, I just want to use repetition and gravity alone really. I don't want to press anywhere at the moment. I just want to hold the rod in the middle and let the gravity go backwards and forwards, and I want that, where possible, to take away the high spots. Now I'm seeing a low spot right here. There's a high spot here and there's a low spot here. Now that could partly be the cause of some of the slap we're hearing down here. Complete low spot here, and a low spot there, and a low spot there. Sorry, not on the A. Let's look at the A. So low spot there, bit low there. So there's a couple of spots, but I'm hoping that once we take away, that's very low action actually, it's probably too low. So having lowered the action here, what you reveal often is the nut is now no longer properly cut for this action. But that's taken the nut out of the equation, and it's still got a little bit of buzz in there, and I call that fret slap still. So I'll just double check before I start carrying on with the sanding. Sorry, the thing that's 1.5. I'm convinced at this point that it's a 9.5 inch radius. It better be, because if it was a 7.25, it wouldn't be as easy to make it play at this low action, because 7.25 inch radius is what should I call it? It's the geometry kind of prevents you setting as low an action as you can go with a higher radius, like a 9.5 and above allows you to have a lower action. Now I'm putting a little bit more force into this now. I'm doing a bit more downward pressure because I need to, whoops, I need to tame these strings a little bit harder than before. Again, like I say, there's a definite, my fingers are going very dirty here, there's a definite, definitely that the nut slots now are too low for this action, but cleaning up a bit, still not there yet, so I'm going to recalibrate one last time on the A track, and then now, like I said, it's not as if this side of the neck is more or less uneven than the treble side. It causes fret slap because the strings on this side of the neck don't tolerate, or they need the space, whereas the strings on the treble side are more forgiving because they don't spin as much, they don't describe as big a circle. So here we want to basically level this out until we get rid of that slap. There we go, and I think it's about as far for now as I want to go. I can ignore the first fret action being too low because that only really counts on the open string like that. As long as I'm fretting it, it takes it out of the equation. I'm going to stop there for now. That's not bad, but we're now going to go on to probably the most challenging one of all, and that's the E, which is riddled with fret slap, but we'll see how well we can achieve some reduction here. Now here it looks like it's flattened out even more compared to this truss rod, so we're just about on the mark, and that's as far as I can go with the adjustment anyway. Right, so again we're going to start off pretty light to begin with. Make sure I'm sort of covering from side to side on this, on the track as I call it. Sort of make sure I cover all of it right to the edge of the fret, because that's critical. Sort of follow the roll of the fret, otherwise we'll end up just doing one spot and not the others. Okay, so there's definitely a high fret here. Now I did say the 5th was high, and this is responding definitely by taking a lot off there, relatively speaking. So it wasn't enough to show up as a single choked off fret, but it's definitely showing up here as a fret that's definitely too high. Not bad, not bad. What are we on? 1.5. We're definitely on exactly 1.5. I'll do a little bit more on this one and then I'll stop, because partly I'm going to need to double check fairly soon that I'm not dealing with a 7.25 when I think I'm dealing with a 9.5. As I said before, it changes the game a bit. Now, of course, the other key issue here is if I did my research and it definitely said 9.5. The Thomas Blug one that I've got at home to set up for Rob is a 7.25, but this one did say, look at that, it's not moving again. No, it's about right. I'm going to double check that. If it does move, yeah, I'm going to have to look back at the video. There was more on this side, wasn't there? So I think this thing is trying to go back, and the problem is if it doesn't stay where we tighten it up, then we may have to put a tiny piece of material in there, like a little bit of sandpaper, just to prop it out and keep it where we want it to be. I'm not that keen on putting bits of paper down there, but typically people, when they do little shims, they use a little piece of sandpaper like this, little strip of that. So I might get a bit ready just in case, because we've got to keep the neck where we want it, and if the bolts for some reason don't hold it, then we have to make sure it goes there with a bit of a push. Yes, there's a party going on. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I think we're going to need to let's slack off these these bolts for a minute. So I'm going to just loosen these off a tad, and while it's in its loosened position, I'm going to look I think it does need something in there to just help it stay to one side. So while these screws are out, I'm going to see if I get a little tiny bit of paper in there to hold this thing out where I want it. That's probably going to work. And then I've just got to make sure it drops down inside here. So it's all a bit grab it, push it, shove it, tip it inside there, poke it down with a blade. There you go. So I basically put that little piece of stuff in there, sandpaper. I'm going to tighten this up there, check it before I go any further. So on. Tighten it here and here and here. Okay, so that should stay. That's in the right place. I'm going to give it a hand crank. Oh, there's kids over here coming back to their parked cars. I'm going to give each one a hand crank to make absolutely sure. There we are. I don't think I'm going to get any tighter than that. Right, so next thing on the agenda is I'm going to slack off the strings for a minute, and I'm going to measure the radius. Now, if we get a bad shock, and this turns out to be the 7.25, actually no, vintage, their Thomas Blug isn't 7.25, it's 7.5. So if this is a 7.5, then I'm in trouble, because we don't have any, in this country there are no 7.25 Tusq nuts anywhere. Well, that's definitely a 9.5, so I'm happy about that. So my idea, having prepped myself a brand new Tusq 7.5 millimeter nut already, and I've also got me a Tusq string tree standing by. So I'm going to first, while I've got the chance, I'm going to get rid of the string tree, these horrible metal ones. I'm going to replace it straight away with a Tusq one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to widen that, because the Tusq the Tusq string tree has a fatter screw, and what I don't want to do is run any risk of thingying the thingy, you know what I mean. I don't want to split the wood with a wider that thing. God, a wider screw. Actually, this is the one I need. Thought so. So it just helps to ease it up by a bit of a bigger pilot hole, like that. And then it'll be safe. So the reason I would change the nut anyway is that this one is a new bone, which isn't lubricated the same way that the Tusq one is. Although it's a nice material, it's not bad. I want to go for the best possible one, but also, even if I wanted to keep the new bone one in place, the reality is that now I've lowered the action, the Tusq, the new bone nuts slots are too low. So that's often what happens when you change the action. So what I'm going to do, funnily enough, it happens. It's more often when they've done it really well the first time. If they've got it spot on the first time, it's usually less tolerant of a change in the playing action, because they will have got it perfect the first time around. So I'm just going to see if this thing will start moving of its own free will, and it looks pretty snug. So there's two ways I'll try and lift it before I take to pulling it to pieces, and neither of these ways is my favourite. There is a bit of movement here. Let's have a look. Let's make sure there is before I... You can see it's pretty well glued in, I think. No, I don't think it wants to come out. So I'm going to have to destroy it for a minute, but I've got my replacement Tusq, black Tusq lubricated one, which is going to be adjustable, because that was part of the thrill. So yet another one to kill off, but you don't want to run the risk of breaking the maple behind the maple. No, that's not the stuff. The rosewood behind there. Come along. Come on, why don't you come out? Occasionally this happens this way and it's mighty annoying. So that's going to undo that completely, which is also mighty annoying. And then I have to grip this with something else to get it to come out. Bear with me. Come on, out you come. Thank you. So, mandrel. There you are. Right, where's my cutting disc gone? I used it just the other day. This one is no good because it's got plastic. It's gone all floppy and horrible with the plat. Here it is. Thank you. Right. I'll get there eventually. Yeah, so it's a pity to cut a nut off, but like I say, better than risking breaking anything else. So let me just get those bits of the leveling stuff out of the way. And that and that. Right, you out of the way. Camera, you come here. Take a close look at the evil destruction about to befall this nut. What a fuzzy little mess that is. Right, let us see what we've got. Now it's trying to break off a chunk of this. I'm going to have to glue that anyway. So that doesn't want to come out without taking off a chunk. It's well glued in. So why don't we take off that chunk that wants to come with it. Thanks. We aren't going to get it out any other way. Holy cow. That is grotty. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to get this back together first? I think I'll just hike that back together first. Bear with me, out of sight, out of view for a minute. Let's get this into there. Get that into there. Get that onto there. Get that down on there. Very good. You stay there. Of course, I actually haven't got tissue to mop it up. Stay there. So that's always the risk. Got a very thin piece of rosewood after the nut slot, which is always vulnerable to damage. Right, so what I'll just carry on doing for a second is trying to cut away more of this stuff, get down to the bottom. Smoky. So again, we've got this challenge that if it's glued in too heavily, whether we like it or not, it won't be going anywhere easily. That feels pretty tightly glued, I've got to say. Looks like we're down to the bottom of the the slot. So it either plays ball or it doesn't. And this bit is broken, that's going to come off, which is good. Hurrah. And this bit wants to stick. That's basically what it wants to do. Why, I thank you, finally. Okay. So, apart from making a mess, all is quite well. A little bit of sanding and polishing to do there. And then we got there's quite a lot of glue gone in here, I have to say. And this could be, I don't know whether this was factory amount of glue or not, but it's quite a lot. But that's okay. We'll get round it. And there's a little bit to be carefully taken off the front edge of the fingerboard. There's quite a lot there actually. They're really partying over there. Good night for it. Been a nice day. Oh, God, a lot of glue. That is a lot of glue, which is why that thing didn't want to come out. Okay, let's have a look how we're off for a fit. That's not far off. I'll make an adjustment to the nut itself, to make it fit. I've made this one adjustable already, so it's going to be on little legs. I don't know what you can see there. Oh, very close up. Wow, that is quite some glue chunks in there. Not far off. So yeah, the idea about the adjustable nut is that you get to choose your perfect first fret action and kind of raise and lower the action until you get where you want. So we're nearly there. I think what's too thick? I think the treble end is a bit too thick. Right. I think that just about feels right. Yep, that's perfect. So it is now. I'm going to just take a quick look and I'll just see how it's going to start out too high, because the idea about the adjustable nut is I want the adjustable nut to start with the strings sitting on the first fret. So let's move this one, even things out to about there. Put some pressure on. Okay, so that's quite a bit high. And it's similarly high at either end, and that's fine. So we'll need to take that down and also remove some of this extra room on the end of it, and actually most of that room needs to come off that side. Now we can change this over. Why don't we do that? Let us put the barrel drum thing back on here, and let's use that to take off the bulk of the thing first. So we've done our cutting, terrible, scary cutting. What I'll do in a minute is once I've recrowned the frets and we've sorted out the height of the nut and everything, I'll take a tea break or a drinks break and give this bench a clear up. So what I want to do at this point is just do this sanding Dremel. Well, actually what I really want is it to stay in place, not do what it just did. Stay. Tighten up. Thank you. Thank you. Tighten up now. Thank you. So I'm going to take off some. Oh, actually, I'm going to do is I'm going to call my dear mum in a minute. So I'm going to take some of this off now. Check a little bit more in a minute, but it's probably more of a sanding off with one of these, probably the best thing. Actually quite easy to use if you're just careful. These little jeweler's files, and you can quite quickly spot when you're reaching flush with the finish and stop your messing around. It's often I try and cover up the whole area here with masking tape and whatever, but funnily enough this is just as easy to just do it like that, and then obviously I'm going to round off these bits as well so they're not sharp, and the bits at the front. Okay, I'll double check that in a minute. Right, so that's the approximate length with a tiny adjustment either end. Sorry, the view has probably gone terrible. Twink. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take this, I can see we're about a millimetre too high. And what that means I'm going to do is I'm going to start sanding this nut down a bit. Now it's one of those ones that starts off with a mixture of, it's a combined one which has a curved base and a little foot in the middle. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to sand this down and aim to really reduce it in height. That's the main aim here, and I can see what I'm doing by checking on the inside. Obviously, like I say, our plan is to bring the first fret action up to where we want it, and that's my reason always for using the adjustable nut. So I always want to preserve the smooth factory cut slots. No matter how careful we are with no matter how expensive our files are, the homemade filing of the slots always kind of makes them a bit more ragged. They're not very smooth when we use the files. So since you've paid for these molded factory smooth slots, my idea is to do everything I can, A, to have Tusq because that's the best lubricated material, and B, to have, I'm going to sneeze. Okay, still playing. That needs a little bit too high still. Yeah, to have the, pardon me, that hurt my head. To have the Tusq material with the Teflon in it, not just the regular Tusq. Not just Tusq, but Tusq XL with the Teflon in it. And then when you've got that, to preserve the factory molded slots. And so I figured out the way to do that was to find a way to bring the slots up to the correct height, as opposed to cutting down with instead of bringing them down with, as I normally or used to do, with the nut files, cutting and stopping at exactly the right action. Now, if I had no choice, I would do that, because getting the right first fret action is more important than anything else. So I would still do that if there was no other way. But having discovered the joys of making these custom adjustable nuts, then my take on it was, let's do it that way, so we get the best of the Tusq material, we get the untrammeled factory slots. That's still above the mark, so I'm going to go down a bit further. Yeah, you get the best of the Tusq material, the untrammeled factory slots, and the perfect first fret action by virtue of being able to dial it up and down with the grub screws as much or as little as we want. And that's a good fun part about it, is that, you know, when somebody says to me, once you've got this adjustable nut going on your guitar, what height do you put the first fret action? And the beauty of the adjustable nut is you put it to whatever height suits your playing. And so if you're a very light player, you can set it at almost no height at all, which makes it buttery smooth and easy to play. Or if you need a bit more, or you want a bit more height, you raise it up a little bit higher. I'm a fraction of a millimetre away. So you see what I'm doing is I'm aiming to sand this down until it's exactly the right size, so that it will sit. It will when it's sat in the slot correctly, it will deposit all our strings onto the first fret. And of course they won't play very well like that, but what we'll do is we'll come up from that using the screws. So here's our first start point. And if you get it just to the first, sit on the first fret, then my experience shows that it works very well to raise them up from there. You'll need a small amount of turning on the, gosh, it's still, gosh, right, it's nearly, if I put this under a load with these, I think it'll all sit down flat. Yeah, it's pretty much on there. I mean, there's a fraction above it, but it's near enough to not bother doing any more. That's pretty much, that's about the lowest action I've ever seen, but that's going to work okay. So there's a couple more little things to do. The first thing is slack off again. I'm going to mark the point where this nut is going to stand. So what I do that with is I get a couple of pointed nosed grub screws and put them into the nut first. In fact, they're the screws that I'll use anyway, but I'll start off by inserting them into the thingy, and they're pointed nosed ones, and they're quite long. So to begin with, they go in to the nut like that, and I stick them through until they come out about a millimetre the other side. Then you'll see I'll do is I will line this up in the slot, something like that. Come back in here, line this up in the slot like so. Then I'll basically figure out where it's going to be. That's okay there, there and there. And what I do is support that like that, and I go tap 1, tap 2. That gives me two marks onto the rosewood in the nut slot, and I just mark that up. Then I'll show you in a minute. So then I'm going to dial these further through. Now at this point I don't want the pointed ends, I want flat ends, so I screw them all in to about the same height, and I want as little in the end sticking up as possible, but I need enough to dial in. And then I end up with that much sticking through. I get my flush cutters if I can do it, and I snip off that one, like so, and I snip off that one. Now that gives me two slightly ragged bottomed grub screws, at which point I'm now going to gently sand them flat. So this gives me, hopefully in a minute, two flat bottomed grub screws with hopefully no major pointy bits. And obviously holding them by hand I can't really make them totally flat, but I can get them reasonably flat to be going on with. So I think I'll call that good enough. Now I get me a drill bit, find the right ones, get me a drill bit. There's one. I don't know where the other one's gone that I want. Is that one? Is it that one? No, is it that one? I seem to have misplaced the one I want. There's a smaller one. Normal service will be resumed in a minute. Come on. Oh, there's a larger one. That will do. Yeah. Not what I had in mind. So what I do now is I go and I put a little drill bit into, this is a HSS bit, put a little HSS bit into the dot that I marked in the slot, and I use sort of finger drilling like this, as you can see, just to drill a little dip, that thing. And then the idea is, once I extend the little feet a tiny bit, this will allow me to just try out the nut in here, and the idea will be that the little dents will sit the screw in and stop it, the grub screws, and stop them from moving sideways like so. Now what I will also just do is I'll do the second bit, which is to just make them slightly wider. So ideally I would use the bit that just about covers the whole width of the nut slot. That would be the sort of guide for the size that's good to do this little cavity dip drill. And if it doesn't want to do it that way, I'll go backwards. And some of these are a little bit, can be a little bit aggressive. These bits, they bite in when you don't want them to, so a slightly blunt one's a good one for that job. So I have my little dents, and there I have my nut fitted nicely, and I can feel a little bit of run over on both ends, so I'm going to do my best to just level that one off and round off the edges on it so it's as nice on the hand as possible. And that's that end. So it's quite a bit of fiddling around, but it seems to work really well. Now, some people in the past have questioned, does anything settle on these nuts? Do they settle in any way? And I've only had it happen once, that sometimes they compress the wood a little bit. Rosewood tends to be very dense and isn't prone to settling even with this pressure on it. So it's never been a problem so far. But of course the beauty of this is if it does even the slightest amount, you can then just compensate by raising it very slightly. Okay, so I'm going to come back. I mean, I could test that now just to be absolutely sure before we do any recrowning. I suppose it makes sense, doesn't it? While we've still got strings on, let us do it as if we were getting ready to play it. So I'm going to do up the G and the D first. Now this is now standing a little taller because it's standing on the grub screws a bit now, which I know are sticking out slightly. sticking up, I should say. Now the other question people have asked is, does the do these nuts ever break and fall apart? And so far the answer, after a few years of using them, is no. Some people say, well, why don't you put a third grub screw in? And I haven't needed to so far. Now up here, I was going to say I appear to have lost the Allen key. So actually this is almost a perfect action, thanks to the fact it's already slightly raised up on the grub screw. If you remember, I extended it to get it to sit in the hole. But the idea now is you can just make the tiny adjustments until it's wet where you want it. And I will call that perfect for me. Might even be a fraction low. So yeah, you can make adjustments until it's right for you. Beautifully out of tune, naturally. But if we were to now put it in tune, very low and light. Okay, that's good. Happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these strings off and prepare to re-crown. Oh, yeah. When you've got adjustable nut fitted, take the outside ones off first and work inwards, so that you leave the G and the D holding on to the nut last of all, so it won't ping off. And then I would fit it the same way in reverse, if you get what I mean. Okay, adjustable nut pretty much ready to go. Ta-da. Put it to one side. So now we're done with these strings. I wonder if I'm going to find funny little knots in here. No! Hurrah! Now these are, what we have on this guitar is easy lock tuners, and I don't use the double holes in this. And the reason I don't is from one experience only. I sort of enthusiastically used them as much as I could at the beginning when I first found out about them. And then what happened was I've discovered that actually if you just trust to the 90-degree string turn to stop your strings moving, amazingly on the plain strings, the thinner strings, the E and possibly the B, actually that isn't enough. It's not enough to hold them, and I found strings starting to slip on those tuners. So ever since then I've reverted. I still buy the easy lock tuners because I like the quality of them, but I don't use that double, that 90-degree bend as a locking device. And that's because with the type of stringing up that I do, it doesn't need a locking device. I'm not really a fan of locking tuners full stop. I don't think they're necessary. You get the nut right and you get the what's the other thing you get right? You get the nut right and you get your string stretched, then you don't have any problem at all. Now I'm just going to do something here, a little quick piece of remedial work while I've got everything kind of out of the way. I'm going to put a piece of frog tape across here, and I'm going to just I'm just going to sand out this little bit of glue overspill and then polish back up. So it's a little, when you put glue in anything, or you something splits at all, you'll always get, it'll never go back flush, not exactly anyway. So I'm just using this to sand it flush, so it's no longer has that little disjunction. And then it's actually quite difficult to get your fingers into this bit here, but I shall do my best. And the nice thing about this stuff micro mesh is you can do a little repair like this and sort of run it all the way through the grades, and before you know it, you're back to a shine, and you're pretty done, and you can't feel any difference. And you may be able to see it sometimes, because repairs always have a visual aspect to them. They're not always totally invisible, but by the time we're done, you wouldn't really have noticed it if I hadn't have drawn attention to it. So after this, as soon as I've done this bit, I'm going to recrown these frets, and then I'm going to get ready to tape everything off and polish everything out. And I think while I'm doing that, I'll call me Ma and have a chat, and then I'll come back to finish the restringing and the stretching out and intonating. We should be good to go. See, look, that's almost new. 8,000 and 12,000. I mean, it ends up with a shine on there that you couldn't pay for. That's pretty good. Right, so that's a little repair. So we do the recrowning bit. Oh, what I did notice, by the way, about these frets is that they are a bit sharp. So I'm going to take my file to each one of them and just to round off these ends, because when they're sharp they're a bit annoying, and it'll just be, I'll only need this little file here to round them off. I'll show you how I'll do it. So I will just kind of sneak in there into the corner of the fret and just take that little sharp bit off on each one, and after that I'll go over the whole end of the frets with a piece of sandpaper, just to sort of soften up the faces, and then the idea then will be is once I've done the recrowning and I do this polishing and sanding out, the idea will be to make sure that the sandpaper I'm using and the micro meshes all kind of catch the fret edges as well, to sort of help the process of sanding them or softening them off back to a nice, as soft and uncatching as possible. So that's that way round, and then we'll come back down here. It was a little bit fiddly when you're over the body area like this. I've just noticed there's also some cellophane paper caught under here that I'm going to try and remove. Now, what I don't really want to do is take the neck off again, because we've already gone to the trouble of fitting a side shim and tightening it back up in place, and it seems a shame to move it. So I'm going to see if I can just slack off the scratch plate here and remove it that way, because I hate it when that stuff gets caught. So it's amazing how sharp these ends can be, and it's sometimes the little corner bits where the sloping bevel hits the edge of the neck is where the fret feels sharp. So I'm just trying to take off that little blade part, that little snicking noise. So then can get a 180. 180 is that? I've got a little bit of 240 here. That's what I really want. And I've got some over there. I don't know why I'm searching around. I've got some gold coloured 240. But what I then do is I'll do a couple of things to protect things. I'll do first of all that. I'll take it off any minute because I won't need it. And then that. So I'm going to just go. I'm just going to go down the end here on the sort of beveled angle with the 240 grit, and I'm just going to make sure that I clean off any burrs all the way down to here like that, and then switch and do the other side. Now the other thing is, once I've done that, that's the edges done, but what you kind of want to do is get a little tube of the same stuff and then kind of just go up and down the edge like this, and I'm hoping that sort of goes into the sides of the frets and just helps to take off any sharp edges there, and it sort of chops up the paper quite a bit, so you have to change sides and do the same on the other side. And change it round like so. And that's sort of leaning over onto the fretboard a bit. Okay, so that's that aspect. Take this off for a minute. Take this off for a minute. We'll lift off this for a minute if we can. I don't know how the view is over there, but so the idea just now is I'm just trying to get the cellophane out from underneath here because it's ugly. Of course, the easy way would be to, yes, the only way will be to remove the neck, but I want to do it because I hate the look of the paper caught up under here. And actually, since we're going to take the neck off to do it, might as well just polish the whole thing out with the neck off and then put it back together. And switch to 5, undo the neck. Right, not what I was planning, but out comes everything. Out comes everything. Woohoo! That's a little bit on the loose side. Wow, wow. So you get all this sticky up bit of wood. This was messy. The threads on the screw always chuck out a load of stuff, which sort of gets in the way of everything. Right, there's my little bit of thingy. Here comes me nasty stuff. That's off. This is looks like it's been hand adjusted here. Wow, this is crazy. I can't believe this. Is this really laminate? What do you think? I say, what do you think? There goes the nut. Hang on to that. I could use that. What do you reckon? That's as much laminate looking as I've ever seen in my life. But, no. Help me, people. Is that a laminate? Or is it just some strange... No, no, it's not, is it? That's not a router mark. But if that was a laminate, then you'd probably you'd see down the holes here, wouldn't you? Wouldn't it show up more clearly there? Yeah. Oh, come on, how does this... No, it doesn't appear to be a laminate in there. Maybe there's some weird router that does that. Maybe it's part of the CNC thing that I know nothing about. Wow, that's the weirdest looking thing. It hasn't even done the corner properly. I'll show you. Look, it sort of got to the corner and got a bit lost. See that? Wow, that's something else. I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, it just could be, that would be some incredibly grooved tool, wouldn't it? I mean, that would have to be cutting in one piece, no movement. That's a single cut with a very grooved and already somewhat damaged bit thing. Weird. Let's put that down there. I don't know. Don't know at all. Right, so I've cleaned that up. Let's put it back together again. Now we're here. Let's hold off with a little... what was I going to do? No, let's do it together. I mean, let's do it all in one go. While I'm at it. In you go. In you go. In you go. Now, of course, I don't have the strings on, so I may still have to redo this at some point later on. So if I loosely tuck everything in, and then I come down here and I push this out a bit and I drop in the shim down there and I say, that's about right, isn't it? And everyone goes, yeah, I think that will do, just about in there, and we agree on that, and I shut that there, a bit further down, push that in there, and everyone's happy, and I let that sit there-ish, and we do it up. Keeping in mind, we may still have to move it. Right. Okie dokie. So, we are now ready for the recrowning bit, which is straightforward. I've done the fret ends. We need to round them off, soften them off still in the sanding process. Get my medium thing, medium side, and we recrown the frets. Knowing that there's more work to do on the base side because we had more leveling to do on that side in the process of alleviating the fret slap. And in particular, this fifth one here is quite a lot of work on that base end because it's basically sticking up a bit. I'm not a great fan of taking a mallet to the frets once they've been fitted and or glued. I figure that if you start hitting them, you're going to break any glue seals, and it's very crude. We might end up pummeling them further into the wood than you want. So I'd rather, providing they're not bouncing and they're not moving, I would rather work them down with the fret leveling process and crown them out like this than to be whacking them, to be honest. Which is why you very rarely see me hitting frets, even if I think they're not very well seated. And if they're, to be honest, if they're bouncing and they're loose, there's no real point in hitting them because they'll bounce back up. And you'll actually, if anything, you'll probably make the grip looser. So, if you really do have a bouncing fret, you have to consider whether you can glue it down successfully, in which case super glue will probably be your only option, but even then sometimes that isn't enough. It depends. you know, it may be if the fret slot is too loose, sometimes no amount of glue is going to hold it where you want it. Okay, so that's going well. Okay, that is re-crowning done. So, while I get off and have a call with my ma, I'm going to at the same time get on, and while I'm doing that I will be masking off the fingerboard ready for sanding the frets out. And while I'm here, let's just pull off a little bit of the stuff, any bits of swarf that were on here. Come on, off you come. Hooray. Right, so I'll see you when I've done that and we're ready to restring, stretch out and go. Thank you, see you in a minute. Okay, whew. Polished, cleaned out, sanded out, oiled, ready to go with new strings. So we will place you down here and zoom out while I get the new strings in. And we're going with a set of variable 9s, which I'm hoping to find a full 6 strings in this package tonight, unlike yesterday where there were only 5. Or was it the day before? So Saturday night, time to go home and hang out till tomorrow. And I've got another guitar tomorrow, and the tomorrow guitar is Jonathan's number 5, made in Mexico, Strat. And yep, that'll be a really mega run of 5 guitars in 1 week period. Which is great. Nice to have a run of things like that. 1 a day is a very nice, what's the word? What do you call it? Order book. Is that the right word? When you've got things lined up, ready to go. Okay, so first of all, bags, packaging away, ready to take to the tip another time. So here we go, fitting the adjustable nut in place. So we'll take the 2 lowest strings off to one side, and we'll start with the D, and we'll use the D to pin down the strings. Now for this one I'm going to use the top part of each of these easy lock tunery things, because that's how I like to do it, and I'll make sure the string goes under it. I'll get my clippers, and in a minute I'll need my tuner thing. So first of all, I'm making sure the string's up and in the block properly, and then I pull back a fret and I start winding. Hold the held string taut over the loose string. Second time round, pull up the loose string and direct the held string under and then onto the nut, which will then hold that nut in place from here on in. Now this actually went down lower than I wanted it to go for a change. So I'm going to pull that upwards a bit. God, they're making a noise. Having a good time, I mean, over at that campsite, whatever it is. Okay, and then we do the G. Now, the saddle's height should have stayed the same throughout the process, but it's often the case that they move. Moving the guitar, jiggling it around and stuff can cause the grub screws to wind themselves in or out. So it's always worth, we're going to double check and make sure everything's the same playing height as before. So again, not using the easy lock part of it, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they're good quality tuners and they'll give you years of service but I just used the top hole of the post for this. My locking method of stringing seems to work fine. I think partly because these tuners are a bit aged and got some build up on them. I think they're sort of grabbing the string and holding it a little bit, stopping it sliding together, so that may actually be counterproductive and storing a little bit more spare slack on there than I want, but that's the consequence, I'm afraid, of using the relic aesthetic. Okay. So check that the ball's up, and then taut over the loose one, taut under the loose one, and then under the string tree. Snip. And there we have it. So the key thing after this, of course, is the stretching the strings to get rid of the slack. And as you remember, the tremolo is currently set flat. It's usable, but it's probably quite stiff, but we're going to leave it there until I double check whether Jonathan wanted a fully floating tremolo or just down only, in which case I can make the adjustment from home. It's easy enough. So I'm going to just pull everything a little bit to make sure it's on before going for my first tune up. So really rough tuning just to get up to pitch. So, the secret of tuning stability, Tusq nut first of all, followed by thorough stretching out of strings until your guitar doesn't detune anymore. Jonathan must be sick of hearing me saying this now. Ow! I just hurt my thumb on the staggered pickup. It was so staggered that it got in the way of my thumb. So again, I'm being careful. I've got loads of spare nines actually. I don't know why I'm so nervous with nines, as I do have loads of spares, but normally I don't have loads of spares. So before I go any further, let us look at the heights. Yeah, 1.5 fraction over. That should be all right. Whoops, 1.5. Just under. Okay. Down a fraction, down a fraction, down a fraction. A quarter of a turn I'm going on each of these. Right. bit more of the old stretching. And as I say before, you got to do this until you can't be bothered to do it anymore, but mainly until you don't get any further detuning, because that's when your strings will stay stable at that point. And the thing is that the Stratocaster Tremolo or vibrato unit gets a lot of unfair criticism. People think it's a rubbish system. It's absolutely brilliant. It's just misunderstood, and the truth is it's the nut and the slack in the strings that makes it unreliable. So the point is, you get the nut and the strings stretched, you can use Tremolo for hours. Or for a while. At least if you get the thing fully stretched out until there's no more detuning when you bend strings or you stretch them like this. And the more you do it, the more stable the tuning will remain. And the more, as I said yesterday, the more you'll want to take the guitar off the peg and play it. And that's really the marker of how much time you've put, or effort you've put into the nut and the stretching. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to check the intonation. And make sure that it's good. Looking at it, I think it will be. Take that off just to get rid of any gravity pulling downwards. Quiet. Just check reliefing, and it's tiny. I'm going to put a little bit more relief in the neck because it's very, very small, almost non-existent. And I think that it's interesting because this feels like it's going positively in the opposite direction to get some relief in there. .5 mils there. Oh, let's check. We need to move the thing. Right. So I'm okay with the intonation, but what we need to do is readjust the thing. So I'm going to get myself another piece of this stuff, and I'm going to double it up this time because I don't think that's holding the thing in place as a shim. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut it in half, I'm going to fold it like so, and that's going to be our piece. And so I'm going to undo the neck bolts. I'm going to need to get the other piece out now. Let's see if I can. Will it come out? I bet it won't. No, my luck, I'm going to have to take it right out. Blast. Right, so what I'm going to do before I do that is grab hold of the, what's it called, that thing, capo, and I just want to make sure it holds the strings so they don't go everywhere. Darn it. Right, see if I can get this piece of coming out. No. Damn. Right, so there's the other bit. So not the ideal situation, but you can see we're working with nice and tight. In you go. In you go. In you go. That doesn't seem to want to go. Trouble is, you see, I might need to have ideally a piece stuck to the wall to stop it moving, because this seems to be far too likely to move out the way and get squished up unless I can kind of push it into place like this. Okay, let's see. Come on, now. Thank you. One, two. Still doesn't want to do it. That's because it's too far down the bottom. Damn. So that needs to be up the front. See, that's what I really don't like about Fender style guitars is this too much movement, space in the neck. We don't want this much. So I'm going to now attempt to get this tucked into the front part here, where it should be, but if it doesn't want to go, it doesn't want to go. And that's come off its saddle anyway, so that's no good. Thank you. Right. Start again. One, two, things be any more difficult than they are. Right, there and there. Slam. 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 Right. Good, 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 good. On target. Thank you. So yeah, that's what I don't much like about fender necks. Now that, I've just got to double check the action. I don't like there to be so much movement that you can end up with that problem, having to be fixing that like there. Okay. Now, did we get more? Barely any more relief out of that. I'm going to have to try with another maneuver thing, one of these. Of course, you never get a clean run at it. Okay, I'm happy. Forgot to put the back plate on. Right, so I'm going to put the back plate on. We're going to check on the floating or the down only. Either which way we'll do the adjustments at home. So we're pretty much done. Thank you for sticking with me. Sorry about the last bit of messing about, moving necks and stuff. Annoying. But the problem is, if you don't get the neck into the position you want, it'll wander off again as it did before. So hopefully that shim will keep it there. Oh, there was one little thing I forgot to tell you all. When I was doing the polishing out and stuff, is if you have one of these guitars, these vintage, or any vintage guitar actually, or any guitar with vintage, no, Wilkinson pickups. When you come to do any polishing or cleaning, cover up these little Wilkinson logos because they come off. They come off if you tape on top of them, put tape on them, they'll come off. If you try to do too much cleaning and put naphtha on top of them, they'll come off because they don't stay on too well, and it looks a bit odd losing some of your letters on the way. Right, so I'm going to attach the adjustable Tusq nut hex key on there, and we're done. Thank you for watching. A bit late tonight now, so I'm not going to do it a test play, but we're all done and dusted. See you tomorrow for the Made in Mexico Strat.